This morning we have Ms. Coonan.
Good morning, Commissioners.
We can't see you yet, Ms. Coonan. Ms. Coonan, apparently there's a hitch probably at this end, and I think we can hear you, or I heard you before, but we can't see you. Are you still there?
Yes, I am, Commissioner. I am.
Thank you.
I can see you.
Well, are the council happy to proceed with on audio?
Sorry.
Right, Ms. Coonan, we'll continue on audio until such time as the visual link can be established. So, Ms. Thornton.
Sorry, just before Ms. Thornton starts, can I just stop?
I'm told that there has been, it's been on intermittently. The person who has the solution to this problem is off-site, is going to attend site, so we may have to break when that person arrives. But let's see how we go. Thank you.
Thank you. I appear for Ms. Coonan.
Thank you, Ms. Thornton.
Ms. Coonan, can you see me?
No, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Ms. Coonan, you've prepared a witness statement dated 6th of August 2021 in response to the summons you received from the Commission dated 6 July 2021. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you have a copy of that statement with you?
Yes, I do.
And that's a document ID number CRW 998-002-0180.
Yes, that's correct.
And if you turn to page 36 of the document, is that your signature?
Yes.
I understand you wish to make an amendment to paragraph 175 of your statement.
Sorry, in the excitement over audio video, I forgot to swear the witness in. We've overlooked that step. Would you wish to swear an oath or affirm?
I'll take an affirmation, thanks, Commissioner.
Do you have the words of the affirmation, or otherwise I can read it out and you can repeat it after me?
If you'd be kind enough to read it out, please. I don't have it in front of me.
All right. I, Helen Coonan, sincerely declare and affirm.
I, Helen Coonan, sincerely declare and affirm
That the evidence that I give to this Commission
that the evidence that I give to this Commission
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Ms. Coonan. I apologise for that. Ms. Thornton?
Commissioner, would you like me to start again, or are you happy to accept that we'd got to where we were, which was Ms. Coonan said that her signature was on page 36 of her witness statement, and she wishes to make an amendment to paragraph. That's at page 29.
Paragraph 175.
Yes.
What I wish to substitute was the correct document, which is CRW 700.067.1109. It's the Responsible Gaming Code of Conduct as it applies to Perth, and the Melbourne one had been previously annexed.
Yes, Commissioner, so it's subparagraph B of 175, where there's a reference to the Code of Conduct. It was previously CRW 512.0091575.
Thank you.
And it's now CRW 700.067.1109. my instructing solicitors will file an amended statement later this morning with
Thank
that
you.
correction. Is that the only amendment you wish to make to your statement, Ms Coonan?
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner, I tender that statement.
The witness statement of Helen Ann Coonan dated the 6th of August 2021 with the amendment to paragraph 175 little b will be, and bearing the identifier number CRW.998.002.0180 will be admitted into evidence as an exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. That is the evidence in chief of Ms Coonan.
Thank you, Ms Thornton. Ms Cale.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms Coonan, can you see me? We can't see you, so it's all a bit...
Yes, you're very blurry, Ms Cahill, but good morning. I think I can make you out there.
Thank you. And just to add to our technical problems this morning, I've just learnt that apparently with the feedback from your audio, there's a need for me to wait a second or two once you've completed your answer for the feedback to cut out. So if my questions appear a little stilted, it's for that reason.
Thank you.
We call up please witness statement CRW.998.002.0180.
We're striking a second technical difficulty, which is that we can't view documents until such time as the Zoom box, whatever that is reset. So I think, Ms Coonan, I apologise for these technical difficulties, but I think we should adjourn and wait until these technical issues have been resolved, and then we can restart on in a more conventional way. So I apologise for that, but if you wouldn't mind just remaining available, and we'll get a message to you as soon as we can as to the time of resumption.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's fine from my end.
All right. Well, we will adjourn, as I said yesterday, pro tem.
All rise.
Thank you. Ms Coonan, we can now see you, and I apologise. What I'd like to do is, if we could push through to, say, midday our time, 2 p.m. your time, we can reassess then. I know the time difference will interfere with a lunch break for you, but do you feel comfortable with that we go through to 12 and then have a look and see how we're going?
Yes, thank you. If I have any difficulty, I'll make it known. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms Coonan, where I was going to take you before we broke was to paragraph 7 of your witness statement at page 0180.
Yes.
You're speaking there to your expectation that you'll resign all your directorships in the Crown Group by the 31st of August, which is just in the next few weeks. And my question is this: do you expect to have any further involvement with the Crown Group after that time?
No.
Not even informally?
Well, I haven't turned my mind to it, Ms Cale, but the events of the last few months have been so intense and have required much of my attention, so that I haven't yet had an opportunity to consider that, but I certainly don't intend to have any formal role. Whether there's some informal role in some capacity, I wouldn't rule out, but it's not my current intention.
So just to be clear, you don't expect to enter into any consultancy agreement or other kind of contractual arrangement to provide advisory services or anything of that ilk?
Well, that hasn't been discussed or raised with me at all.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to ask you some questions about the Burswood entities. First of all, historically. Now, your own involvement with the Burswood entities prior to becoming a director this year, I think is explained in summary form at paragraph 10 of your witness statement at page 0181. If we can go there, please.
Yes.
You identify receiving board reports, that's CRL board reports in relation to Crown Perth.
Yes.
Which I understand from paragraph 11 until you became executive chair in 2020, those reports were limited to a report from Barry Felsted, that was then the CEO of Australian Resorts.
Largely, that's correct.
And you mean a written report?
No, he also gave verbal reports. He attended the Crown Board meetings as well.
All right, but there was always a written report, was there?
That's my recollection.
Now, I gather from the second sentence of paragraph 11 that prior to becoming chair in January 2020, the CRL board did not receive a written report from the boards of any of the Burswood entities.
That's correct. It was limited to minutes of Crown committee meetings that operated in respect of the subsidiaries.
So the actual minutes of the board meetings of the Burswood entities were not provided to the CRL board?
No.
And it was usual, wasn't it, to have a member of the CRL board sitting on the Burswood Limited board, typically as chairman?
Yes, that was correct. It was Mr. Alexander during the time of his executive chairmanship, and prior to that, Mr. Packer, and I appointed Mr. Poynton,
Yes.
chair of Burswood, when I became the chair of Crown Resorts.
And is it the case that before this year there was no formal procedure for any Burswood Limited director sitting on the CRL board to report to the CRL board about the Perth casino operations?
That's correct. I I directed that should happen when I became chair. So each of Mr Poynton in respect of Burswood, Mr Demetriou in respect of Melbourne and Ms Halton in respect of Sydney provided reports from then on.
Yeah. But before then, when there was no formal procedure, was it simply assumed that if a CRL director sitting on a subsidiary board such as Burswood Limited knew of anything to do with the local casino operations that ought to be brought to the attention of the CRL board, then they would do so?
Yes, in addition to Mr Felstead's reports.
Now, if we go back to paragraph 10 of your witness statement, in that last sentence, you are saying there in effect that prior to becoming a director of the Burswood entities, and presumably you mean when you were a director of CRL, you also attended the premises in Perth from time to time and had conversations with management and employees. You see that there?
Yes.
Between December 2011 and February 2021, so that 9-year period. Sorry, did you hear me did you hear that whole question?
No, I'm sorry, you just cut out there with the time frame. But I think I get the gist of what you're trying to say, Ms Caleb.
I'll start again. Between December 2011 and February between December 2011 and 2018, approximately how many times did you visit Crown Perth?
I visited Crown Perth in respect of formal Crown board meetings that were held there from time to time, including, if my memory serves me correctly, 2 AGMs. And apart from that, I would have visited Perth and the property probably upwards of half a dozen times, but not a dozen, somewhere in between there.
Thank you. And about how many times did you actually visit the Perth casino?
On each visit, as I recall.
Thank you. Now, back to paragraph 11, you identify that once you became chair in 2020, you directed the chairman of each subsidiary board to give updates to the CRL board on their respective properties. And is that by way of a formal written report that can be studied beforehand by the CRL board members, or is it simply a verbal report?
No, the CEO at that stage gave what I would call the substantive report, and each of the directors gave largely a verbal update in relation to their overview and impressions from board meetings of the subsidiaries.
Right. Now, the minutes of the Burswood Limited board meetings are still not provided to the CRL board?
I'm not sure about that. You're possibly correct about that. I obviously have a familiarity with them now in my current role as the chair of the Burswood's Consolidated Group, but for last year, I'm just not sure. I don't think they were.
Now, in the third sentence of paragraph 11, having explained in the second sentence that after you became chair, you directed the chairman of each subsidiary board to give updates, you say, for Crown Perth, this was Mr. Poynton. Now, you understand that
yes.
At the time, Mr. Poynton was the chairman of Burswood Limited, not Burswood Nominees. So what was the rationale for asking him rather than whoever was nominal or in the most senior position on the board of Burswood Nominees to deliver the relevant report?
Well, the way in which it operated was that the Burswood companies operated as a consolidated group, and the overview of the operations was reported to Burswood Limited, and Mr. Poynton was the chair of Burswood Limited and had line of sight in respect of matters that were brought to Burswood Limited. And in that capacity, he did speak at board meetings, not only about Burswood, the Burswood companies, or the Burswood operations, perhaps is the better way to put it, but more broadly the economic conditions in Perth and other matters of relevance to evaluating how Burswood was travelling.
Is your assumption that the Burswood Limited Board plays some role or has some responsibilities to discharge in relation to the Perth casino operations?
Well, the way in which the structure, the structure is set up is that Burswood Limited is the unit holder for the trust that owns the assets of the casino, the licence and other assets. Burswood Nominees is the trustee of the trust, and Burswood Management is the manager of the trust. So it has always conventionally operated, on my understanding, as a consolidated group and reported that way.
On your understanding, does the Burswood Limited Board have any management or executive responsibilities in respect of the Perth casino operations?
No, it's the unit holder of the trust, and the Burswood Nominees is, as I've said, is the trustee for the trust, and the management company employs the people and operates ineffectively as the manager of the trust.
On your understanding, does the Burswood Limited Board have any governance responsibilities over the Perth casino operations?
Well, it certainly has, over the years, operated to assume oversight over all the operations of the Burswood complex, and all of the matters relating to the operation of the casino, the hotel, the food and beverage and other activities are all reported through to Burswood Limited.
So you would, on your understanding, it has governance responsibilities in relation to those matters?
Yes, I would say it does, and it has certainly assumed governance responsibilities.
And on your understanding, does the Burswood Limited Board have any responsibility for the strategic development and direction of the Perth casino operations?
The overall strategic direction is set by the Crown Board, by the parent company, but the local Burswood group has responsibility for the operations of the complex and the activities that take place on it. So yes, it does locally.
So let me understand that. In relation to the local operations, the Burswood Limited Board has complete responsibility for the strategic development and direction of those operations, or partial responsibility? Could you just explain that for me?
Like any consolidated group, the Crown Group sets the overall direction and strategic direction for all of the subsidiaries within the group, and has centralised functions, as I think has been explained to this Commission, centralised functions, but there are also local operations and strategic directions that the Burswood Limited Board has overview of. And so it's, I think you could say that Burswood is local and the Crown parent company has the overview of all of the subsidiaries. Strategic overview.
All right. Does the Burswood Limited Board have any responsibility for the development and growth of the Perth casino operations?
They certainly have input into the development and growth. The Perth, whilst this was driven, of course, by the Crown Resorts Board, the Burswood Group obviously had some overview and input into the development that's gone on with Crown Towers, the rebranding of Crown Perth, and particularly in respect of what I would regard as local obligations, such as dealing with the regulator, dealing with the minister and the department. That was all done at local level.
Are there any responsibilities of the Burswood Limited Board that are reserved to it and it alone and are not delegated to the management of the Perth Casino?
I'm sorry, would you mind just saying that again, Ms. Carr?
Are there any responsibilities of the Burswood Limited Board that are reserved to it and it alone and are not delegated to management of the Perth Casino?
I'm so sorry, you just cut out again. What? Sorry. What?
I was just waiting for that feedback to stop so that my question didn't cut out. I'll repeat it. Are there any responsibilities of the Burswood Limited Board that are reserved to it and it alone and are not delegated to the management of the Perth Casino?
Well, the Burswood Limited Board has obviously strategic oversight for what happens in respect of AML under Part A of the AML CTF joint program. That's not delegated. It obviously has responsibility in respect of the risk profile. Now, obviously, management assists with these matters, but they are reserved for board overview. There's just a couple of examples.
If you had to describe succinctly the difference in responsibilities between the CRL board and the Burswood Limited Board in relation to the oversight of Perth Casino, how would you describe that?
I'd say that the CRL board has the overall strategic oversight for the Perth Casino. It has oversight of some centralised functions such as AML, CTF, risk, responsible gaming, culture, a few of those things like that, important operations. And the local board, the Burswood board, has strategic responsibility for how they're rolled out at local level and oversight of those functions.
So are there any responsibilities that are shared between the Burswood Limited Board and the CRL board, or are they completely distinct and mutually exclusive?
No, they feed up and feed down. They're shared. I would describe them as shared responsibilities, but there are some that are very much operational local responsibilities, such as the example I gave of dealing with the regulator. That's basically has always been run with oversight of the board and carried out by management.
Now, coming back to the situation prior to 2020, when you, as chair, instituted this procedure of receiving a verbal report from the board of Burswood Limited at CRL meetings, was there any interest on the part of the CRL board in learning what the Burswood Limited board was doing from time to time?
Yes, I think well, put it this way, from my perspective and the perspective of the directors at the time, I think it was welcomed to hear from a director with local presence, to be able to hear from perhaps from on the ground as to what was happening. I think that's very valuable for a consolidated group such as the Crown Group to hear what was happening on the properties in Melbourne, Sydney and Perth, and it was welcomed by the directors, and there was active interest in what was contributed at board level, at Crown Board level, I should say.
The report from the chair of Burswood Limited that you now require to be given during CRL board meetings, what is your expectation as to the subject matter of that report?
It should relate to what happened at the last meeting, and if my memory serves me correctly, the last meeting in June dealt with the usual financial overview, and it dealt with a very detailed report on risk and the update of the risk profile for Perth. It dealt with the rollout of Mr. Blackburn's AML uplift policies. It dealt locally with occupational health and safety issues in relation to Burswood. A number of matters relating to the operations of the group. It always should contain a regulatory update, and particularly in respect of Burswood, matters to do with an AUSTRAC notice that had been received, and other matters to do with what had happened with restricted trading following COVID. They're all the sorts of matters that would be relevant for the chair of Burswood to report to the Crown Group, together with the broader economic conditions. That might be just an observation from experience, but the broader economic impacts of what might be happening there in Western Australia. So you can see from my answer that the one thing that I do think is really important in terms of me moving on and a new chair of Burswood is that we can get on with finding a local or someone from Western Australia with who can be a good West Australian presence. We haven't yet been able to entirely repopulate the board, and that's certainly something that's high on the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Coonan. I'll ask you some further questions about that very point a little later. Can I just stay with the Chair's report for the moment? When Mr. Poynton was the Chair of Burswood Limited and you were the Chair of CRL at the same time, did you make clear to Mr. Poynton what your expectations were in relation to the reporting requirement from him?
Well, he did report, and he reported on those, not so much in respect of those matters, but more in respect of general trading conditions in Perth. He took a keen interest in the premises and usually knew what was going on. He was very keen to ensure that the resources, CapEx for the Pearl Room, didn't fall by the wayside. Those sorts of matters. So he gave a good account of what was happening on the ground.
But rather than directing him to what your expectations were, you simply listened to what he had to say and regarded it as a sufficient report?
Well, there were questions, of course. There's questions, of course, so that's not the entirety of it, of course.
Now, the fact that you implemented this new procedure of requiring a report from the chair of each subsidiary property board, you obviously saw a deficiency in the process before you implemented that procedure. Is that right?
I thought it could be improved.
So what was the deficiency that you identified that required that improvement?
Well, the improvement that I wanted to see was a direct connection to the director who was on the ground in each of the subsidiary properties to be able to advise the parent group of matters of concern, matters of interest, matters of opportunity, and the usual kind of things that you would expect somebody who lives close to a business to be able to convey to a board.
And you felt, did you, that that was something that the CEO's report wouldn't be able to deliver completely or as well as a chair's report?
Well, not so much that they couldn't deliver it completely or as well, but I think this was an additional benefit to the Crown Board. That was how I saw it.
Are you aware of evidence that Mr Poynton has given to this Royal Commission as to his understanding of his role as a director of Burswood Limited?
No, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to follow all of the evidence. I've followed as much as I possibly could, but I didn't actually hear Mr Poynton.
So Mr Poynton gave some evidence about that and also the role of the Burswood Limited Board as a whole. The effective part of his evidence was that the Burswood Limited Board did not have the power to direct the casino licensee, that's Burswood Nominees Limited, or its management in any way. It only had the power to monitor the licensee's casino operations and to, as he described it, escalate any issues of concern. Would you agree or disagree with that evidence characterising the role of the Burswood Limited Board?
Well, I don't think that's a correct characterisation of the way in which the Consolidated Group operated. But Mr Poynton had been on the board for many, many, many years. I mean, even before I was on the board of Crown. So he may have had expectations that were set at a much earlier time than my engagement with him as a fellow director.
So when you say you don't consider it to be a correct characterisation, do you consider that the Burswood Limited Board has the power to direct the licensee or its management in any way?
Well, ultimately it's the unit holder, and the way in which it has operated has been to operate with able to give directions through the management company and able to effect the operations in relation to the assets of the trust. So that's how it has in fact operated. I haven't, as I sit here, turned my mind to Mr Poynton's idea of capacity.
Mr Poynton also gave evidence to the effect that the governance of the Perth casino operations occurred first at Burswood Nominees Limited level and secondly and ultimately at CRL board level, such that the Burswood Limited Board did not have governance or oversight of the Perth casino operations. Do you agree or disagree with that evidence?
I can tell you about how it has in fact operated, and it has in fact operated with Burswood Limited exercising strategic oversight of the Perth operations that have been run by the trustee on behalf of the trust and by management as the manager of the trust.
So you disagree with that evidence?
I think that's correct.
Mr Poynton also gave evidence to the effect that the non-executive directors of Burswood Limited were appointed to be, to use his words, ambassadors of the Perth casino operations, and their director role was limited to an ambassadorial one. Do you agree or disagree with that evidence?
I don't think that's a fair characterisation of directors' duties. I don't see any problem in having, in addition, regarding yourself as being a good officer of a business, if that's what Mr Poynton means. Not having heard his evidence, I'm not sure what he means, but I don't think that correctly describes directors' duties.
You are aware, aren't you, that the Burswood Limited Board does not have a board charter?
Yes.
And never has had one, to your knowledge, during your tenure as a director of CRL?
I've never seen one, Ms Cale.
CRL board has a board charter though, doesn't it?
Yes.
And you would regard that as an important document underpinning the governance exercised by the CRL board?
Yes, I think that, yes, I do.
And that board charter is reviewed on an annual basis by the board, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes. I'm sorry, you're just cutting out a bit, Ms. Carr.
Yes, that's my fault because I'm not waiting that few seconds I told you I was going to, so you can blame me for that.
Thank you.
So I just mentioned, I think you agreed with me that it's required to be reviewed on an annual basis. It obviously, at its heart, specifies and clarifies the duties, responsibilities and powers of the board. You'd agree?
Yes.
And it also identifies, importantly, doesn't it, the matters that are reserved for, responsibilities that are reserved for the CRL board and the CRL board alone.
Yes, that's true. There's a whole section of that.
Can you explain why Burswood Limited does not have a board charter?
No, it should have, and no doubt that's something that needs to be attended to.
Would you accept that it's a failure of governance by the board of CRL to have not ensured that Burswood Limited has a board charter?
I think the important thing here is that we get one. I think it was an omission not to have one, and it should be attended to.
Well, I was asking you whether it was a failure of governance by the CRL board to have not before now ensured that the Burswood Limited board had a board charter.
Well, I think it's the subsidiaries should be looking at what they do with their charters. I'm surprised they didn't have one. They should have. It's clearly an omission.
But is your evidence that it is a failure of governance by the Burswood Limited board, but not the CRL board, to have not ensured that there was a Burswood Limited board charter?
Well, my understanding, Ms. Carl, is that the Burswood board would have responsibility for their charter.
So is your answer to my question yes?
No.
So does the CRL board have any governance responsibility in relation to whether or not Burswood Limited has a board charter?
The CRL board, well, the most important board here for the purposes of getting a charter is Burswood to have their charter. I think the CRL board would have been as surprised as me that they don't have one. It's an omission and it should happen.
The CRL board should have checked before now, shouldn't it?
Checked. Sarah?
To see if the Burswood Limited board had a board charter.
I suppose the CRL board could, but for example, Melbourne certainly has one. That's set by Melbourne. Ultimate responsibility for the subsidiaries is, of course, the parent company. And I do think that the parent company has to accept responsibility for ensuring that all of the necessary constituent documents and governance documents exist in the subsidiaries. So that's what I've been trying to say, I think, for the last few answers to you, Ms. Carl, that I think it was an omission and they should have one.
Have you taken any steps since becoming a director of Burswood Limited to implement a Burswood Limited board charter?
No, I haven't. I've only been there for a couple of meetings and I'll be leaving before the next one.
Can I ask you now about the CEO report to which you refer?
I withdraw that. I withdraw that, Ms. Cohen, as I'll be leaving before the next one. I'm not entirely sure that my departure will be that precise. It could be that I have another meeting for Burswood and I will certainly be raising it then. I think there is one coming up in a week.
Now, I want to come to the CEO report to which you refer at paragraph 11 of your witness statement. Now, obviously, and you make it clear there that you're referring to a report that the board receives, the CRL board, from the group CEO, yes?
Yes.
And I'm now going to show you a typical example, or ask you to tell me whether it's a typical example of the sort of CEO report that the board of CRL received. This is at CRL.512.001.2092/R, which is a CEO report of the 20th of February 2013.
They had the 19th of February.
We're just waiting for the right document to come on the screen. So if you have that in front of you,
Yes,
Ms. Coonan.
I do.
So this is a CEO report of the 20th of February 2013, and between 2092 and 2095 there's summary financial information for different parts of the Crown Group, including Crown Perth, and that was very typical that there was that summary financial information provided.
Yes. This is the report by Mr. Craigie, I think.
And then at 2096, we have a report or reports on current issues.
Sorry, I just don't have that document yet. Thank you. I don't know whether this is Mr. Craigie's report or Mr. Felstead's, sorry, but I'll try and answer your question, Ms. Cale, if you could repeat it, please.
So now we're at 2096, looking at current issues. That also was a typical way in which the CEO reported. Is that right?
I think that's right at the time. I can only see 3 paragraphs.
So if we ask the operator to scroll through, we'll see between 2096 and
Yes.
2098, so that's the next 2 or 3 pages, that it's dealing with Crown Melbourne.
Yes.
And then at 2098, if you see at about point 7, we get to Crown Perth.
Yes, I can see that.
And so that that report comes in at between 2098 and the top of 2101.
Yes, I can see that. Crown Perth is currently experiencing significant construction disruption. Yes.
Yes. And
Starting there?
yes, and this goes through to 2101, where there's this discussion about Crown Perth and its current issues.
Yes.
Typical, is it, of the manner in which the group CEO reported to the CRL board during your time as a director?
Yes, I mean, it varied, but it dealt with issues largely in that format.
Now, at paragraph 11 of your witness statement in the 4th sentence, you've explained that from August 2020, the board has received reports from the CEO of each subsidiary. Is that right?
Yes. Sorry, paragraph 11.
And was this
Yes, Mr. Bossy.
And was this your initiative to require a report from the CEO of each subsidiary?
Yes.
What was the deficiency in the Group CEO reporting structure that you had identified to make you take that initiative?
Once again, I thought that the board would be, the parent company, CRL, would benefit by some more granular information from the person who was the CEO at the time, and also Mr. Barton, I think, was the group CEO at the time, and then later on in 2020, Mr. Bossy became CEO of Perth, Mr. Walsh became CEO of Melbourne, and Mr. Prentice became CEO of Sydney, and they all provided reports.
And has the CEO of Crown Perth been given any instruction by the CRL board as to what the report he is to deliver should contain?
Yes, he's asked to provide updates on the financials, updates on regulatory issues, updates on any other matters of relevance to the operations. There are always incidences and things that need to come to the attention of the board, and a general report was what he was being asked for of matters operationally that he has been dealing with.
Now, if we go to an example of a report from the CEO of Perth Casino, we can see this in the board pack for the 17th of February 2021 meeting, CRW.507.006.1070_R. And if we go to page 1232,
Mr. Dharmananda?
Commissioners, I believe that this might be one only for council screens as opposed to public screening.
needs to be on the home screen. Off screen. So if we can have it on the room screen only, please.
It's been done.
Thank you. So at 1232, this is where the report begins, and I can tell you it goes through from pages 1232 to 1244. You'd accept that the property CEO's report, the Crown Perth CEO's report, is much more detailed than the group CEO report that CRL board was receiving previously.
Yes, it was.
And if we go to page, you see that it's canvassing here in the 2 pages that are in front of you, the some COVID issues, and then there's a trading update at 1234.
I'm just waiting for it to come up, Ms. Kay. Yes.
And then a business overview at 1235, which continues to 1239. And
yes.
If we go to 1238, please. And do you see there's an update on a number of strategic initiatives which have been identified to underpin growth in the local businesses in the coming years? See that?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Sorry. Are you able to say whether these are the sorts of strategic initiatives that are reviewed and approved by the Burswood Limited board?
Yes, I mean these would be proposals brought to the Crown Group, but they're generated by, in effect, by Mr. Bossy and his team as being appropriate for the business. I mean that's the interrelationship between the subsidiary and the Crown Board, and he'd have some discretions to to do this, to do some of these initiatives. Others he would want to discuss.
But when I was asking you some questions before about the role of the Burswood Limited Board, you mentioned, as I understood your evidence, and please tell me if I've misunderstood it, that there were strategic elements of the business, strategic direction of the local business, in respect of which the Burswood Limited Board had exclusive responsibility in the sense of exclusive from management. So... sorry, not exclusive from management. Management always has to operate and bring proposals worked up for a board to have a view about. But there are some strategic initiatives or some strategy that the Burswood Limited Board would have, such as it can't delegate responsibility for the operation of its AML, for example. All right. Now, if we can...
You have to keep the overview of that.
If we go to the first dot point on page 1238, I won't read that. I'll just ask you to read it.
Yes.
Is that the sort of initiative that would need to be approved by the Burswood Limited Board before Perth Casino Management could implement it?
That's a very complex question because that's a highly regulated area. I wouldn't be able to give you the answer to that because that would have to be something that you would need to have approval from the regulator to do. And if there was approval from the regulator to do it, this would be something that I would think the Crown Board would certainly be informed about, but it's something that relates to the operations of the Perth business.
But would, for example, management have to obtain the approval of the Burswood Limited Board before it could go and seek approval from the regulator for matters for a strategic initiative such as is described in that first dot point?
Management at Crown Perth, conventionally, I'll put it this way, bearing in mind that I have not been involved in Burswood for more than a few months, conventionally they dealt with the regulator. Now, all of the various steps that they take to deal with the regulator in respect of a modification of this kind would not necessarily be visible to the Crown Board. They'd certainly be informed about it, I'm sure. And I remember these kind of initiatives from time to time as part of business generation. And I just simply can't tell you, because I wasn't there, what role Burswood Limited played in it.
So what I'm asking is, at a level of abstraction, taking a strategic initiative such as this, is this the kind of thing that would need to go to the Burswood Limited Board for approval before management could take steps to proceed to implement it, including by way of seeking approval from GWC?
I don't know that in that order. I mean, I really can't abstract sitting here. If you could take me to what in fact happened, I may be able to have a view. But this is such a technical area, and I am aware that management of the Burswood group dealt with the regulator exclusively in terms of providing information back to the CRL board, which is really all I can speak about at this point, I think. This was an update, and it was something that obviously the Crown Board was aware of. It was information.
So let me approach it this way, Ms. Coonan. If at some point in the future at Perth Casino, management considered that it might wish to seek to modify spin rates on EGMs, would it need to go, in your opinion, to the Burswood Limited Board to seek approval to give effect to that?
Well, I would think that that would be part of the oversight of the operations for a technical change of that kind, and it should be something within the purview of the Burswood Limited Group.
So it would go to the board for approval, or it wouldn't?
That's what I just said, it would.
Now, if we go to page 1239, there's a reference to marketing initiatives at about point 2 or point 3. And we're still here in the Crown Perth report. And you'll see in the second and third paragraphs in this section, there's a reference to Melbourne and Sydney activities. See that?
No, I can't see any of that, sorry. I can't see the document number. I've got me talking over the top of it, so I can't see what number it is. 1239, yes, thank you. And what am I looking at, please? Marketing initiatives. And in marketing initiatives,
so if we now go to the second paragraph, commencing Melbourne non-gaming activities.
yes, yeah,
Third paragraph, Sydney activities have focused on promoting.
yes.
So are you able to explain why in a Crown Perth CEO report there's reference to Melbourne and Sydney marketing activities?
I think it was a generic marketing initiatives compilation of information. Although I haven't got the whole document in front of me, Ms. Cale, I can't give you a laser-like answer on that, but marketing initiatives for the 3 properties seems to be what is in contemplation here.
And if we just go over the page to 1240, the first full paragraph, do you see the Crown Rewards project team?
Yes.
Seems to be dealing with a marketing exercise exclusively in relation to Sydney.
Yes, and then in the next paragraph, but 1, the project with the trial planned in the Pearl Room in Perth. It's talking about a rewards program initiative.
But is it your evidence that these marketing initiatives are really more a generic report across all properties?
I think that's a correct characterisation.
And if we drop down in this page to the section of HR initiatives, is it the same with HR initiatives that they are just reported as a whole group across each property in the one report?
Yeah, I apologise. Didn't mean to cut across you, Ms. Cole. Sorry. The IEP program was usually reported upon in great detail to the corporate social responsibility committee that I chaired from inception, and Perth has played a particularly important role in our Indigenous employment program and in our Crown ability initiatives to employ differently abled people. So this, I think, is very much a shorthand report of just a statistic. There's a lot of information in the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee that dealt with these matters in detail.
Is it the case that the property-specific CEO report does not include a report in relation to risk management issues because that's dealt with separately by an ERCC report to the CRL board?
It's dealt with the CRL board's line to risk is through the Chief Risk Officer, who reports to the Risk Committee, and the Risk Committee reports to the board. So the IECC doesn't report directly to the Crown Resorts Board.
Does it report directly to the Risk Committee or only through the Chief Risk Officer?
No, it reports, I think it reports just to the Chief Risk Officer.
And you understand, do you, that the ERCC in relation to Perth Casino is comprised primarily of executives, either of Crown Perth or Crown Group?
I think that's right. I did look at the list. I think that's probably correct.
Does the CEO of Perth Casino presently have any risk or compliance oversight responsibility independently of the Crown Perth ERCC?
Not that I'm aware of, but the Crown Perth, well, he sits on that committee as I understand it, and that committee has got a direct line of sight and responsibility for the corporate risk profile for Perth.
Now, the ERCC was already in existence in Perth when you first became a director of CRL, wasn't it?
I think so. It seems to be been a committee of very long standing, Ms. Cale.
And you mentioned in your witness statement that the ERCC provides legal risk and compliance updates to the meetings of the Burswood Limited Board. You recall that?
Yes, yes.
And as far as you're aware, that committee has always done so during your tenure as a director of CRL?
I'm not sure. I just don't know the answer to that, and I've only been on Burswood for 2 meetings, so I'm just not sure. I couldn't give you an assurance for that duration.
So prior to you becoming a director of the Burswood Limited Board, did you have any understanding or awareness of whether, and if so what, the Burswood Limited Board was doing in relation to the ERCC?
I have to say not prior to, because I became involved in Burswood in quite extreme circumstances where it had lost 2 of its directors and it urgently needed 2 directors to constitute the board. So it's been a process where I have since discovered these matters rather than prior to. I think that would be a correct way to put it, as honestly as I can.
All right, thank you. And in terms of what you've learnt after the event, what's your understanding of the Burswood Limited Board's historical interaction with the ERCC?
My understanding is that the ERCC reports to Burswood Limited, but I can't give you an assurance that that happened throughout the duration of my time on Crown Resorts. I simply didn't have that kind of granularity and line of sight into what it did.
Do you understand from the investigations you've made since you joined the Burswood Limited Board about whether the board previously exercised any oversight of the ERCC?
No, I don't know whether you'd call it oversight. I think there was some reporting up to the board, but I just don't know what kind of oversight Burswood Limited had. Mr. Poynton would have been able to help you there.
Does the Burswood Limited board now exercise any oversight over the ERCC?
Not directly, but certainly we get reports. And we get risk reports, we get AML reports, we get all the usual reports that you should have in terms of governance.
So what does the Burswood Limited board do with ERCC reports now?
Evaluates them, understands what is contained within them, particularly with respect to risk. Ms. Seegers now attends the Burswood board so that we get direct line of sight into the activities of the ERCC through Ms. Seegers. We certainly get Mr. Blackburn's input in respect of compliance and AML. He reports directly now to the Burswood board.
Now, in terms of your own responsibilities as a director of Burswood Limited, do you look to see if there's any concerns that you have about anything that's raised by the ERCC?
Yes, well, I get the minutes and I look and make sure that they're covering the material that you would expect. I mean, I have a slightly greater line of sight at the moment because of my executive chair role, but normally as a non-executive director, you wouldn't have direct knowledge of what the ERCC does because reports feed from it to the boards.
Now, if you, sitting in your position as a director of Burswood Limited, if you received an ERCC report and it raised a concern in your mind that you thought needed to be addressed, would you go back to the ERCC with that concern, or would you go to the CRL board with that concern?
It would depend on the concern. It may be that it would be raised with Mr. Bossy, for example.
And so can you just elaborate that answer by way of an example, a hypothetical concern you'd raise with Mr. Bossy versus one you'd raise with the CRL board?
I can't give you hypotheticals, I'm sorry.
Now, I understand from a previous answer that you gave that because the ERCC reports to the Chief Risk Officer, the CRL Risk Committee does not itself have any direct dealings with the ERCC. Is that right?
You mean the board committee?
Yes.
The CRL board committee? No, I don't think so. I'm not on that committee anymore, so I just don't know.
So just to try and draw the threads together of those series of questions that I asked you.
Can I just correct that question? I have been on the risk committee this year. I don't recall ERCC reports to the board risk committee, but obviously Ms. Seegers attends and her reports to the board are very extensive, to the board committee, I mean.
But how long have you been on the CRL board risk committee, Ms. Coonan?
If I can just, sorry, it's a slightly long-winded answer and I don't mean to make it long-winded, but after the Bergen report and most of the directors resigned, the majority of the board resigned or stepped down from their positions and the CEO stepped down from his position. There were only 3 active directors left and we all had to be on every committee. So it really was from about the 15th of February, as best I can recall it, and we were all on every committee.
So you weren't on the risk committee before then?
I don't think so, no. I may have attended some risk committee meetings because when I was chair, I attended by invitation as many of the board committees as I could. And so in that capacity as an invitee, I have attended risk committee meetings.
All right, now just coming to that final question on this topic, Ms. Coonan, as I was saying, to draw these threads together, are you able to succinctly describe the demarcation of responsibilities between the Burswood Limited Board on the one hand and the CRL Board on the other in relation to risk management?
Yes, the overall strategic risk management is under the control of the CRL Board, but the local board and management are responsible for risk at the properties, and they're responsible for their own corporate risk profile and for adjustments to it. The reporting now is that Ms Seegers attends the Burswood Limited board meetings and provides an update on risks, also relevant to the Burswood properties.
Now, if we come back to your witness statement at page 0192, paragraph 69, you give evidence there that CRL sets the overarching strategic direction for all subsidiaries and manages centralised group functions. When we get to paragraph 70, underneath it, you mention as examples approaches to be taken by subsidiaries on risk management, AML, CTF and responsible gaming. Just to clarify, your evidence is that CRL sets the overarching strategic direction in those nominated areas, does it?
Yes, they're centralised functions, but with local application and implementation.
So when you refer to risk management, AML, CTF and responsible gaming, the strategic direction is set by the overarching strategic direction is set by the CRL board, and in those areas there is also a centralised group function. Is that right?
Yes, that and other areas.
Now I'll come back to those individual topics in a moment, but first of all I want to ask you a question about management. At paragraph 75 at 0193, you draw attention to, in terms, the CEO of Crown Perth reporting to the group CEO. You see that?
Yes.
The group CEO does not report to the Burswood Limited Board?
The group CEO certainly attends, because that's me at the moment, and I'm chair of it too, Ms Cale.
Does the group CEO report to the Burswood Limited Board?
Yes.
Does the Burswood Limited Board have a power of hire or fire over the group CEO?
No.
Does the Burswood Limited Board have the power of hire or fire over the Crown Perth CEO?
Mr Bossy was appointed to his role by the CRL board, so I would say no.
So is it the CRL board who has the power of hire or fire over him, or does the group CEO also have that power, or has that power separately from CRL board?
The group CEO would have that authority, but at the time Mr Bossy was appointed, he was appointed effectively by the then group CEO, Ken Barton, as part of a restructure and approved by the CRL board.
Was he approved by the Burswood Limited Board?
Well, I wasn't on it, so I don't know.
And just to clarify, does the Burswood Limited Board have the power to direct the CEO of Crown Perth in terms of how he is to discharge his role?
It would depend what the direction was, I would think.
And is it made clear to the Board of Burswood Limited what it may direct Mr. Bossy as to and what it may not?
Well, that would depend very much on what overview and operational functions need to be the subject of the direction.
But does the Board of Burswood Limited, has it been given a clear indication by the CRL Board as to what it may direct Mr. Bossy in relation to and what it may not?
That direction and capacity to make directions would depend to local operational matters and overview. It's difficult to demarcate it without knowing what the subject matter is. But as I've tried to explain, the overall strategic direction is the Crown Board's, and the local operation, the implementation of the centralised functions and local matters are the purview of the Burswood group.
Ms. Cale, could I just seek some clarification? Ms. Kernan, you see in in paragraph 76 of your witness statement, the end of the second sentence, in brackets, soon to be Mr. McCann. To what is that a reference?
Oh, I apologise, Commissioner. Mr. McCann has been hired by Crown as the new CEO to replace Mr. Barton, who left the company in February this year. That was the basis for me to step in as the interim executive chair, pending a whole lot of things having to happen, including finding a new CEO. So Mr. McCann has been hired, but as with all casino boards, his appointment is subject to probity clearances in each of the jurisdictions in which Crown operates. So at the moment we're operating as a duo because he doesn't have authority in certain respects until he gets that probity clearance.
Thank you.
Ms. Coonan, how does the Board of Burswood Limited know what it may direct Mr. Bossy in relation to and what it may not?
Well, at the moment that's me, and I've got a very clear idea about what I can do about directing Mr. Bossy. Obviously going forward, once we direct our mind, as you quite rightly allude to putting a charter in place, those demarcations will be clearer. But as a practical matter, the Burswood group can direct Mr. Bossy in respect of how he carries out his functions locally in respect of implementation of matters that relate to the operation of the property and the casino.
Now, in relation to centralised functions, you've given some examples at 76, and I understand you to be saying there in terms that because you referenced the Chief Marketing Officer, that marketing is a centralised function. Is that right?
Well, there are local marketing. I mean, obviously, if you want to attract people in Perth, that's got some local functions. But the overall strategic marketing function is centralised.
So is marketing a centralised function?
It's certainly centralised, but it has local impact and some local decision making in relation to that.
Now, if we can call up PCRC.004.007.003, what's coming up on the screen, and you may have a hard copy, Ms. Coonan, is an organisational chart we were provided by Crown's lawyers the day before yesterday. Do you have that in hard copy, or are you looking at it on the screen?
I can read it on the screen.
The reason I ask is because it's double-sided in hard copy format, so it depends whether I direct you to the first page or not. In any event, have you got the page that has the heading at the top, Perth Executive Team, with Mr. Bossy in the top?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I had that.
Now, there don't appear to be any marketing executives on this page. If we go to the next page, where we've got the Perth Group Executive Team, do you have that?
Yes.
And we see on the right-hand side, do you see Mr. Nick Emery's name?
I do.
Yeah. Looking at that box and down the right-hand column, we see a chain of marketing executives.
That seems to be right, yes.
Can you just explain, for the benefit of the Commission, please, the colour coding of this document? The pink shading in a box designates that the position is a group role, is that right?
I don't know. I really don't know. I can't clarify it, but you could be correct.
All right, well, you'd understand at least...
Oh, yes. Okay, I can see now.
You'd understand at least that Mr. Emery, as the Chief Marketing Officer, that's a group function, a group role.
Yes, I didn't have I didn't have the whole document, Ms. Cale. I can see now the shading and the reference to group roles, yes.
Now, do you see that if we take Mr. Emery as an example, there's a dotted green outline in the box for his role?
Yes. Yes.
And the legend at the bottom of the document, designates a green outlined box as Crown Melbourne. Do you see that?
Yes. Yes, I can see that.
Does that mean that the position is employed through the Melbourne corporate entities?
I don't know. I can't confirm that. But I know that Mr. Emery is located in Melbourne.
Is he employed by Crown Melbourne, or is he employed by CRL?
I can't tell you.
Do you know who the CFO of Australian Resorts is employed by?
I don't know the direct employment lines, no.
Now, if we come back to the marketing executives, we see that all of those roles are shaded pink except for the GM, General Manager of Marketing. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And because that box is white, do we understand that that person is employed by Burswood Resort Management Limited?
I don't know.
Is that role located in Perth?
I don't know. I don't know, Miss Townsend.
Ms. Cale, the feedback seems to me to be getting a little worse. Perhaps we should break. Ms. Coonan, the feedback is getting a little worse at this end, from my perspective. I think we might take a break now and see if something can be done at that, because it may be at the Sydney, it may be occurring at the Sydney end. But just before we do that, if you've still got that document, you can see in the top line several references to Mr. McCann.
Yes.
And he's referred to as CEO and MD. Do I take it from that perhaps subject to probity approvals, he would be appointed to the board?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's the intention, Commissioner.
All right, thank you. I think the most appropriate course is if we break now and take the lunch break now for 45 minutes. Come back at if we come back at say, I can't see the clock. 20 minutes to 1 it would be 20. So it's 20 minutes to 3 your time, 20 minutes to 1 our time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner.
Jim, that's the room she's in with.